Please be seated. How many of you here can remember a time when you couldn't buy bread in slices? I don't see many hands up because the bags of pre-sliced bread that most of us take for granted didn't become commercially available until almost 100 years ago in most places. In 1921, the Continental Baking Company ran a series of ads for a mystery product, promising consumers that it would be revealed soon. That product was Wonder Bread, which in 1930 became one of the first major brands to be sold already sliced. It's hard to imagine today that this was a big deal, but it was. It's also hard to imagine that it didn't catch on right away, but it didn't. In fact, it took some convincing to get bakeries and consumers on board. The complaining and grumbling began almost immediately. Some people thought that the evenly cut square slices of bread looked sloppy. Others were concerned that sliced bread wouldn't last as long as a solid loaf because the individual slices would dry out faster and become stale. Today's lesson from Exodus strikes me in a similar sort of way. If you all are having trouble imagining sliced bread as a strange and novel thing, try for a moment to imagine how you would react to this little ad campaign that God runs out in the desert, when he promises the Israelites that in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord. Then try to imagine the sudden appearance of this flaky, white, apparently edible substance in the morning. You've never seen anything quite like it, and you're not entirely sure how it got there. Mouths are hanging open, including yours, and everyone is staring at this mystery product saying, "What's this? What is it?" These people have seen the glory of the Lord, and they don't know what to do about it. I've always thought of manna as the original Wonder Bread, and I've always wished that Wonder Bread got its name from the book of Exodus. Alas, it does not. It comes from the wonder experienced by one of the Continental Baking Company's executives as he watched hundreds of hot air balloons gliding across the sky at a festival. In fact, the balloons inspired those iconic red, yellow, and blue bubbles on the Wonder Bread package, and this simple image of wonder has become one of the country's longest-running food item logos. The manna in the wilderness has a pretty good run itself, being restocked daily for 40 years. And yet, at the beginning, the Israelites view this new product with both relief and suspicion. As with those early consumers of pre-sliced bread, the Israelites react in a way that seems odd to us. We understand that the appropriate reaction to this unexpected and abundant source of nourishment is gratitude. Instead, the Israelites worry that there won't be enough and it won't last long enough, so they gather as much as they can and it goes stale. The initial wonder at this mysterious, life-giving substance seems to evaporate almost as soon as it appears. The other thing I've always wished is that our lectionary would pair this morning's reading with the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. It's the obvious correlate, right? Jesus conjures enough food from a few loaves of bread and some fish to feed thousands of people. And you can imagine people asking, "What's this? What is it?" To their credit, the crowds do realize that what has just happened is somehow connected to the Exodus story. Yet not even a full day goes by before the complaining and grumbling begins. Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness. What sign will you give us so that we may see and believe that you are of God? This question seems outrageous. Surely the act that they have just witnessed is sign enough. What more could they possibly want? But before we get too impatient with our biblical friends, I want to remind you that not so long ago, people resisted the idea of purchasing pre-sliced bread in a bag with a twist tie. So is it that difficult to imagine being resistant to Jesus' claim that he is the living bread that comes down from heaven, and that whoever eats this bread will live forever? Coming face to face with the glory of the Lord in these ways must have been overwhelming. And I think that that kind of overwhelming wonder is really hard to sustain. I think the Israelites' sense of wonder gets lost in the everyday routine of collecting and consuming the very substance upon which their survival is dependent. In the same way, the wonder is short-lived for the crowds of Jesus' followers who are only just beginning to understand that the bread of life might be standing right in front of them. These stories illustrate the often confusing nature of wonder. I looked it up, and along with surprise, amazement, and gratitude, a defining characteristic of wonder is doubt. When we encounter something new and strange, however wonderful it is, we often find ourselves asking questions like, what is it? Will it last? What will happen if it doesn't? Consider Wonder Bread. During World War II, the US government actually bans the sale of pre-sliced bread. And like the Israelites, consumers who are already rationing butter, sugar, and milk start complaining. They grumble, and after a few months, Wonder Bread is back on the shelves. But eventually, in 2012, financial struggles forced the makers of Wonder Bread to declare bankruptcy and discontinue production. So we can hardly blame the Israelites for worrying that this manna might go away. They know that the manna melts away in the afternoon, and that if you keep it longer than you're supposed to, it goes bad. They don't know that manna will be in production for 40 years. What if tomorrow it's suddenly gone? And then there's this Jesus, this bread of life. When the crowds learn of this mystery product, they say, "Give us this bread always." And Jesus tries to reassure them that he is in fact the bread of God that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And that's a catchy slogan, but then Jesus goes away too. Each of these stories speaks to the human capacity for wonder. How difficult it must have been trying to maintain a sense of wonder for those wandering in the desert for decades. I'm sure that some of you even remember or have heard about the challenge of finding wonder amid food shortages and rationing during times of war. And it must have been devastating for the disciples and early followers of Jesus to experience the wonder of his presence and promise, only to have it melt away in those early days after his death. Wonder is hard when the very thing that sustains us is suddenly gone. So what about us? How do we retain the wonder of things that happened so long ago? How might we find that wonder today? To explore this question, I'd like to share an anecdote from Bruce Feiler's 2001 book, Walking the Bible. In the course of his travels throughout the Sinai Peninsula, Feiler learns of a possible inspiration a scientific explanation for the manna in the Exodus story. As it turns out, a variety of shrub found all over the Middle East produces a byproduct similar in taste and appearance to the mystery product described in the Old Testament. The sweet substance forms during the night and crystallizes in the morning sun, and if it's not harvested quickly, these sugary white flakes dry up and disappear. Do you think this explanation detracts from the wonder of manna? I don't. Feeler asks a Bedouin man about it. It's spiritual to eat it, the man says with emotion. It's kind of a surprise. Some years you have it, and some years you don't, and you never know which it's going to be. It's a blessing. If that's not a description of wonder, I don't know what is. So does the wonder ever really go away for the Israelites? Do they ever get sick of eating manna at every meal? I don't know. If the popularity of pre-sliced bread is any indication, I doubt it. Wonder Bread, by the way, survived bankruptcy and announced its return in 2013 with a brand new slogan: "The wonder is back." And week after week, we come back here for a taste of the bread of heaven, and with it, a taste of wonder. Friends, the journey from what is it to I am the bread of life to the wonder is back isn't always a straight line. Our ability to experience wonder comes and goes, and sometimes it seems to be gone for good. Sometimes wonder is right in front of us, and we don't recognize it. But the good news is that the source of all wonder isn't going anywhere. The kind of sustenance that God provides won't get stale, won't dry up, won't melt away. The bread of heaven isn't subject to rationing, and there is plenty of it for every one of us. So next time you come face to face with wonder, the next time you find yourself asking, what is it? What is this? Consider that it might just be the glory of the Lord. And while your mouths are hanging open in amazement, remember that when wonder comes back, it's kind of a surprise, and it is indeed a blessing. Amen.